Aveline Lloyd was the perfect senator's wife, until the gala where her husband struck her before Britain's elite. Silence shattered when her 12-year-old daughter exposed a year-long operation, hidden cameras, secret recorders, and a live-streamed trap led by her powerful family. That night, the abuser fell from power. 6 months later, Aveline rose again, free, rebuilding her life and designing hope for others. My name is Aveline Vance, but the world knows me as Aveline Lloyd. 2 names, 2 completely different people. Aveline Vance was an architect, a creator of living spaces with souls made from steel, glass, and concrete. She believed in decisive lines, sturdy structures, and the truth that a good building could change the way people feel about the world. Aveline Vance won awards, laughed loudly in bars in Shoreditch with friends, and went backpacking alone in Peru with a single backpack and no specific plan. She was an impromptu symphony. Aveline Lloyd, on the other hand, is an ice sculpture. Beautiful, cold, and carefully carved to fit its pedestal. That pedestal is my husband, Senator Harrison Lloyd, the rising star of British politics. Aveline Lloyd doesn't design buildings. She chooses menus for fundraising galas. She doesn't go backpacking. She smiles from a yacht in Monaco. She no longer has old friends. They have gradually disappeared, uncomfortable with the silence and tension that always surrounds me. Aveline Lloyd is a meticulously planned symphony where every note is written by someone else and any improvisation is considered a dangerous mistake. Tonight, at the most important fundraising gala of Harrison's career, that plan is about to be set in motion. I know my role. I have to play Aveline Lloyd one last time. I have to smile, be graceful, and then, at the right moment, I have to let that icy layer shatter. The dry smack echoed, sharp and clean as a gunshot in the night. It wasn't just a sound, it was an entity, a newborn monster that sucked all the air, all the whispers, all the notes of an unfinished Chopin piece from the Steinway grand piano in the corner. An absolute silence, heavy and tasting of metal, enveloped the lavish ballroom. The only sound left was the tinkling crash of a guest's champagne flute falling to the marble floor, like a belated and pathetic echo of the shock that had just occurred. One of my cheeks burned. The pain wasn't just a sensation. It had a color, a glaring red spreading behind my clenched eyelids. It had a texture, like thousands of tiny glass shards embedding themselves in my flesh. But that physical pain was just a small ripple compared to the tsunami of humiliation that was drowning me, washing away every scrap of self-respect I had painstakingly pieced together over the past 5 years. The room, with its crystal chandeliers sparkling like trapped galaxies, its guests in expensive Tom Ford and Vera Wang evening wear, its ancestral portraits of the Lloyd clan staring down from the walls with the sternness of old gods, had suddenly transformed into a modern Roman Colosseum. And I had just been struck down with an unarmed blow in front of the entire political and financial elite of Great Britain. My husband, Senator Harrison Lloyd, stood there, his chest heaving with rage, his nostrils flared like a bull ready to charge. The handsome, trustworthy face that millions adored, the face that had graced countless covers of Time and The Economist, was now contorted into a satanic mask. Pure, unadulterated hatred flashed in his piercing blue eyes. But only for a fraction of a second. He was a master, an artist of deceit. Instantly, he readjusted every facial muscle, remolding his expression. The primal fury was replaced by a look of anguish, a perfectly feigned concern honed through thousands of rehearsals in the privacy of our marriage. Ava, my love. His voice dropped, laced with a calculated worry, just loud enough for those closest to hear. You're not well again. I shouldn't have let you get so stressed. It's my fault. That was the second attack, 1,000 times crueler and more effective than the slap. He didn't just hit me. He was declaring to the world that I was insane. He was rewriting reality right before their eyes, turning his act of violence into the pitiable reaction of an exhausted husband to his wife's instability. I saw the guests' eyes change. Shock turned to pity. A few nodded sympathetically at him. A lady in a pearl necklace shook her head slightly, whispering to the person next to her, "Poor Senator. He has endured so much." I saw Lord Ashworth, the main target of the gala, frown at me with annoyance, as if my outburst was an inconvenience, a flaw in a perfectly planned evening. They were buying his story. They were eating it up as readily as they would the Belgian chocolate dessert the waiters would soon serve. My whole body trembled, an uncontrollable shiver that started deep in my bones. I was prepared to collapse, to accept the role of the mentally ill wife he had written for me for 5 years. Tears began to well up, not from pain but from helplessness, from an ultimate sense of loneliness. The Italian marble floor seemed to be beckoning, inviting me to fall, to curl up and disappear. That's what he wanted. That's what everyone expected, a familiar scene. But then, a voice spoke. It wasn't loud, but in the dead silence it was as clear and pure as a bell chiming on a winter morning. "Grandmother Beatrice, do you think what Father just did would make a good headline for the Times?" Everyone, as one, controlled by an invisible string, turned towards the source of the voice. It was Chloe, my 12-year-old daughter. She stood there, in the midst of the chaos, terrifyingly calm. Blue velvet dress. Her gaze wasn't on me, nor on Harrison. It was fixed on the most powerful woman in the room, her grandmother, Countess Beatrice Lloyd. Chloe tilted her head, a gesture she had learned from my father, General Alistair Vance, a gesture that meant, "I am analyzing you, and I am not impressed." "I was thinking of a few headlines," she continued, her voice as steady as if she were reading a report, without a single tremor. "Senator Lloyd strikes wife at children's charity fundraiser," or maybe, "Domestic violence after Thanksgiving turkey." But perhaps my favorite is... She paused for a beat, a perfectly calculated silence to maximize the drama, a skill she had learned from debate competitions. Then she looked directly at Harrison, at the man who had just hit her mother, her clear eyes reflecting his distorted image. The name grandfather gave the campaign: Operation Reclaim Justice. The silence now had a completely different color. It was no longer the silence of shock. It was the silence of a ticking time bomb that had just begun its countdown. In my daughter's eyes, I saw no fear. I saw steel. I saw a plan. I saw her grandfather's legacy, and I knew this drama was no longer directed by Harrison. The curtain had been raised on an entirely new play, and the lead role was no longer his. 10 hours before dinner. The dawn in the Surrey countryside was a damp, silver gray, as if the sky itself were tired. Fog blanketed the perfectly manicured gardens of the Lloyd estate, making the Greek marble statues look like ghosts mourning in the cold. Inside, the house was as silent as a tomb. A polished, expensive, suffocating silence, the silence of a place where emotions were considered vulgar. I woke up at 6, as I did every day. Routine was my armor. Harrison was already out of bed, probably in the basement gym, punishing his body on the treadmill just as he punished my soul. His routine was as precise as a Swiss watch, a cold precision with no room for spontaneity or warmth. I sat up, looking around the bedroom. It was more like a palace showroom than a private space. 18th century antique furniture, a Persian rug worth a small house, damask curtains so thick that sunlight couldn't penetrate until the maid drew them on schedule. This was not my home. This was Harrison's stage. I went downstairs, my footsteps silent on the thick carpet. Breakfast was already set on the table in the small dining room, a room still larger than most people's living rooms. It was just the two of us. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, a woman whose face never showed emotion, silently placed a plate of pre-cut grapefruit and a cup of Earl Grey tea in front of me. Trash. They have no vision, just gnawing at petty details instead of looking at the big picture. I ate my grapefruit in silence, its sharp acidity matching my mood. The silence between us was not peaceful. It was a void filled with unsaid things, swallowed accusations, and smoldering resentments. "Tonight is very important. You know that," Harrison said, finally putting his tablet down and gracing me with his attention. "Lord Ashworth will decide on funding my upcoming campaign. Everything must be perfect." He looked at me, his eyes scrutinizing, scanning my face like a doctor diagnosing an illness. "Did you sleep well? You look tired." "I slept fine," I lied. I had been awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling, feeling the walls closing in, listening to the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, counting down the seconds of my imprisoned life. "Good. I need you to be fresh. You look a bit pale. Perhaps we should tell the makeup artist to use a bit more concealer." He said it as if he were commenting on the choice of curtains, a purely aesthetic matter with no connection to the person sitting in front of him. I took a deep breath, trying to gather what little courage I had left. "Harrison, I need to talk to you about something." "What is it, my love?" He took a sip of his black coffee, but his impatience was evident in the way he placed the cup back on its saucer with a small, sharp clink. "About the foundation, the one in my name," I began, my voice trembling slightly. "I don't think I'm ready." "Not ready?" he interrupted, a cold smile flashing across his face. "Ava, this isn't about whether you're ready or not. It's a strategic move. It shows compassion. It turns our weakness into strength. It shows we're not just distant politicians, but people who have faced adversity and come out stronger. The public loves that. Our weakness? I repeated, a chill running down my spine. You mean my weakness? I was by your side, Ava. I held your hand through it all. Your story is my story. We are a team. He said the word team, but the real meaning was asset. I was an asset in his portfolio. I wanted to be consulted first. It's my name, it's my life. He stood up and walked over to me. He didn't get angry. He did something worse. He acted understanding. He placed a hand on my shoulder, his voice terrifyingly gentle. I understand. I know this is difficult for you. It brings back a lot of painful memories. But think, my love, how many people your story can help. You will become a symbol of hope. I'm just trying to help you find a new purpose. He was suffocating me with kindness. He was turning my objection into another symptom of weakness, of selfishness. He kissed my forehead lightly, a cold and possessive kiss. Just be my beautiful Aveline tonight. Don't think too much. I've taken care of lingering scent of his expensive Creed Aventus cologne, a reminder of his presence, even when he was gone. 4 hours before dinner. I was standing in front of the large mirror in my dressing room. This room was larger than my first apartment in London, a space I had designed and decorated myself with all the passion of a young architect. Now I stood in a mausoleum filled with clothes I rarely got to choose myself, Oscar de la Renta gowns, Chanel suits, all selected to fit the image of a politician's wife. I was wearing an emerald green silk gown. Harrison had chosen it. "Green brings out your eyes," he said as he walked in, tying his tie with a practiced, decisive motion. His voice was smooth, charming. "It also conveys a sense of stability, of trustworthiness. It suits our image perfectly." Our image, meaning his image. I was just a carefully chosen accessory, a backdrop to highlight the main character. I used to be an architect. I used to create buildings, spaces with souls. I won awards, received recognition. Now I myself was an empty space, decorated by someone else according to their will. "I think I'll wear the Jimmy Choos," I said, a weak attempt to reclaim a tiny piece of sovereignty. The silver high heels, sparkling like a promise of another life, were one of the few things I had bought for myself after getting married, in a rare moment of rebellion. He glanced at me in the mirror, a smile not reaching his eyes. "Aren't those a bit too high, darling? I don't want you to trip. You know, after everything. Everything." Those 2 words were his ultimate weapon, the master key to my invisible cage. Everything was my mental breakdown 5 years ago, a period of severe depression and anxiety after I had poured my heart and soul into an ambitious architectural project that failed due to a partner's betrayal. It had been exposed by the press. Harrison, then a young, rising politician, had stood by me, playing the role of the devoted husband, a model of patience and tolerance. He had saved me, and ever since he had used that salvation to chain me, to remind me that I was weak, that I owed him, that my sanity was as fragile as a pane of glass that could shatter at any moment with a single wrong word. "I'm fine, Harrison. I won't trip," I replied, my voice harder than I intended. "I'm just worried about you, Ava," he said, stepping closer and placing his hands on my shoulders. His touch was cold, possessive, his fingers squeezing slightly as if to remind me of his strength. "Today's event is crucial. Lord Ashworth will be here. I need you at your best, fresh, smiling, and don't complicate things." Don't complicate things. Meaning, don't have an Darrow. She leaned against the door, her dark brown eyes unusually intelligent, observing us like an anthropologist studying a strange tribe. "You look beautiful, Mom," Chloe said. "That green is like the color of your old architectural blueprints. The color of creation." A small needle of warmth pierced through the ice in my heart. She remembered. She always remembered. Harrison turned, a flash of annoyance on his face. He disliked anyone mentioning my past, the past where I wasn't his patient. "Chloe, don't bother your mother. Have you done your homework?" "I'm researching for the debate team," Chloe replied, turning a page, her eyes not leaving the text, but I knew she was listening to every breath in the room. "This week's topic is, does objective truth exist in a relationship of unequal power? It's quite interesting." Her gaze flicked up from the page, meeting mine in the mirror. A spark of understanding, a secret message passed between us in a fraction of a second. She wasn't just reading. She was sending me a signal. The plan is still on. I'm with you. Be strong. Her subtle challenge did not escape Harrison's notice. He narrowed his eyes. You're becoming more and more like your Aunt Isabel. Talking like a lawyer. That's not always a good thing, Chloe. He turned to me, his voice a warning. Be ready in 15 minutes and wear the Manolos. The heel is lower, safety first. He left, leaving behind a tense silence. I looked at my reflection in the mirror, a woman in an expensive dress, with empty eyes. The fire had been lit long ago, smoldering under the ashes of resignation. Tonight, it was about to erupt into a blaze. I looked down at the sparkling Jimmy Choos. Then I looked at the nude, safe, and boring Manolo Blahniks he had chosen. I bent down and slipped my feet into the Manolos. Tonight, I would play the obedient puppet. For the last time. As the first luxury cars, Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, Aston Martins, began to roll up the gravel driveway to the estate, I had put on the mask of Aveline Lloyd, the graceful hostess. I stood beside Harrison in the main hall, where a giant Christmas tree was already decorated for the festive season, smiling, shaking hands, making small talk about the weather, art, and holidays in Tuscany. The estate was filled with silver-haired politicians, pot-bellied tycoons, and wives with skin so perfectly tightened that their smiles looked strained. They laughed, sipped Bollinger champagne, and ate exquisite canapes, caviar on blinis, seared foie gras with fig jam, prepared by the Lloyd's private chef. Harrison was the center of this universe. He moved between groups of people as familiarly. I saw ministers, powerful journalists, all drawn into my husband's magnetic field. Beatrice Lloyd, my mother-in-law, stood by the massive marble fireplace, observing everything, like a queen surveying her domain. She wore a Chanel tweed suit, her silver hair impeccably coiffed, not a strand out of place. She never moved, but stood still and let people come to her. She beckoned me over with an almost invisible gesture of her diamond-ringed finger. Aveline, my dear, she said, her voice as cold as the champagne in her hand. Lord Ashworth just complimented the rose garden. Make sure you thank Mr. Thomas, the gardener. We wouldn't want him to think you're taking credit for things you didn't do. A reminder that even in this house, I was merely a manager, not a master. A jab at my lost architectural career, where I truly was the creator of things. Of course, Mother, I replied, my smile feeling like it was glued to my face. I'll speak to Mr. Thomas in the morning. She looked me up and down, her gaze as assessing as a horse buyer's. That dress is adequate, but next time, try something a little less noticeable. You should be an elegant backdrop for Harrison, not a distraction. She glanced down at my feet. Good shoes, safe, a good choice. I stood there, amidst the opulence and power, feeling smaller and more invisible than ever. They didn't see me. They only saw Senator Lloyd's wife. They saw a story Harrison had masterfully woven, the beautiful, fragile wife he had rescued from the abyss of mental illness, now living a grateful life under his protection. Every compliment for Harrison, every pitying glance for me, was a knife twisting in an old wound, reminding me of the price I paid for this safety. I felt isolated, appraised, and utterly alone in a room full of people. I glanced around for Chloe. She was sitting in a quiet corner near the library, reading under a warm yellow light, completely oblivious to the party. But I knew she missed nothing. Her ears caught every whisper, her eyes recorded every glance. She was my only ally in this fortress, the silent sentinel of our campaign. Dinner was served in the main dining hall, under the light of 1,000 flickering candles on a long, polished mahogany table. Uniformed servants moved as silently as ghosts, pouring Chateau Margaux and clearing away silver plates. The conversation revolved around politics, economics, and, of course, endless flattery for Harrison and his brilliant future as the next Prime Minister. After the main course, roast lamb with rosemary and garlic, Harrison stood up, tapping his fork lightly against his crystal glass. The room fell silent instantly, all attention focused on him. He stood there, in the candlelight, looking perfect. A Roman god in a Savile Row suit. Ladies, and support is not just support for me, but for a better future. A stronger and more compassionate Britain. He spoke of policies, of hope, of change. People listened, captivated, nodding in approval. I had heard this speech 100 times with minor variations to suit the audience, But then he changed the script. A change I had sensed was coming since this morning. "Tonight I also want to share something very personal," he said, his eyes finding mine at the other end of the table. A pregnant silence fell. Even the servants stood still. "As many of you know, my family has faced its own share of challenges." My heart began to pound. The blood seemed to freeze in my veins. I knew what he was about to do. This was it. This was his move. He was going to use me again to polish his image. "My wife, my beloved Aveline," he continued, his voice thick with feigned emotion, as if he were about to cry, "is an incredibly strong woman, a true warrior. She has battled her own demons, the ghosts of anxiety and depression that so many of us face in silence. And with the help of love, she has won." He looked at me, a single tear almost rolling down his cheek, a masterful, Oscar-worthy performance. A few ladies at the table dabbed their eyes with handkerchiefs. "Her journey has inspired me. It has shown me that we as a society need to do more for mental health. We need to break the stigma, to extend our hands to those who are suffering." He paused, taking a deep breath. "That is why, tonight, I am so incredibly proud to announce the establishment of the Aveline Lloyd Foundation for Mental Health." The room erupted in thunderous applause. Everyone turned to look at me, their eyes filled with a mixture of admiration and pity. "How noble, so brave," the whispers flew through the air. Harrison had done it. He had taken my deepest pain, my most private trauma, the breakdown that had robbed me of my career and my identity, and turned it into a PR tool, a launch pad for his political ambitions. He had stolen my story, packaged it, slapped his brand on it, and sold it to the highest bidder. Rage, hot and pure, rose in me like an erupting volcano. It burned away all the fear, all the hesitation, all the years of suppression. It incinerated the mask of the obedient Aveline Lloyd. I shot to my feet. My chair fell backward with a jarring crash, breaking the harmony of the applause. "No," I said. My voice was shaky at first, but then it grew stronger, echoing through the room. "You have no right." The room fell silent again. This time, a deathly silence. The applause died. Everyone stared at me, mouths agape. Harrison looked at me, his smile frozen on his lips. "Ava, darling, sit down. You're not well." "I am perfectly well," I shouted, the force of years of being silenced exploding. "Better than ever. And I will not sit here and let you turn my pain into a political The end of the table, her face white with rage. "You are embarrassing the family." "Embarrassing?" I laughed bitterly, a near maniacal sound. "Do you know what embarrassing is? It's being constantly told by your husband that you're crazy, to control you. It's being stripped of your career, your friends, and your very identity. It's being turned into a shadow in your own home. That's what's embarrassing." Harrison lost control. In front of his donors, in front of the elite, his puppet had cut her strings. The primal rage I usually only saw behind closed doors now erupted. He strode towards me, his face crimson. "Shut up," he hissed through clenched teeth. And then he swung his hand. Smack. That slap brings us back to the beginning. But this time, it was not the end. It was only the beginning of the overthrow. The reveal. Immediately after the slap, Harrison realized his tactical error. He couldn't let the image of an abuser linger for more than a second. He instantly switched to the role of the anguished husband. "Oh God, Ava," he said, his voice trembling, reaching out as if to touch me but then pulling back. "I'm so sorry. I was so scared. You were starting to say nonsensical things again. I just wanted you to stop." He turned to the guests, his pale face a portrait of extreme distress. "Please, everyone, forgive us. My wife, she is unwell. She needs to rest. She doesn't know what she's saying." He stepped forward, trying to take my arm. "Come on, my love, let's go upstairs. You need to take your medication." "Don't touch me." I backed away, my body trembling with rage and adrenaline. "Everyone, did you all see that? This is what he does. He attacks me, then he says I'm crazy." Beatrice stood up, her posture regal and cold. "Aveline, that's enough. You are making a fool of yourself. Harrison, take her upstairs." "David," she commanded the butler, a large man with a stone-like face, "assist your master." They would join forces, treat me like a psychiatric patient, and drag me away. This script had played out many times, but never so publicly. Harrison and the butler advanced towards me. "No!" I yelled, backing away until my back hit the cold wall. Harrison grabbed my arm, his fingers tightening like a cuff. "Ava, don't make this worse." Just as he was about to use force to pull me away, Chloe's voice rang out again, as cold and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. "I think you should take art camp, Dad?" Chloe asked, her voice even. "The one you said looked like a pile of scrap metal and made me put in the corner of the ballroom so it wouldn't be an eyesore?" Harrison frowned, clearly not understanding what she was talking about. "What about it? What does that have to do with anything?" Ava's flashback. "I remember now. Over a year ago, my father had come to visit. He saw Chloe upset because Harrison had belittled her artwork. Dad had hugged her and said, 'The things others disregard are sometimes the most powerful, my girl.' He had spent an entire weekend in the shed with Chloe, perfecting that pile of scrap metal. They had artfully welded twisted steel bars together. Chloe called it Eye of the Storm, the calm at the center of the chaos. I thought it was a profound name, but it was more than that. My father, General Alistair Vance, a retired intelligence expert, explained it to me later. Inside the center of that Eye of the Storm, perfectly concealed behind a metal shell, was a military-grade 360-degree camera and a directional microphone. It had been recording everything in this room from every angle for the past year. Every party, every argument, every whispered insult. That pile of scrap metal was our silent witness. "And the Mont Blanc pen set that grandfather gave you for your wedding anniversary?" Chloe continued, not giving anyone time to process. "The one you always keep on your desk in your study, the thing you're most proud of, a symbol of legacy and power?" Harrison flinched. That pen was a permanent fixture on his desk. Ava's flashback. My father had given it to Harrison in a lavish velvet box. "A powerful man needs a powerful pen," Dad had said, with a smile whose full meaning I didn't understand at the time. Harrison was smug, but I remember Dad telling me privately, "The most beautiful things sometimes hold the most secrets, my daughter. Leave it where he feels safest, where he speaks his darkest truths." The main fountain pen, the one Harrison never used but only displayed, had been modified by my father and his technical team. It was a high-end digital voice recorder, activated by Harrison's voice within a 5-meter radius. It had recorded every phone call, every meeting, every vicious word, every conspiracy Harrison spoke in the absolute privacy of his study. "And my debate project," Chloe said, looking her father straight in the eye. "You thought I was just studying old cases? I've been working with Aunt Isabel for weeks via video call. She taught me how to legally gather evidence, how to build an irrefutable case. I set up an encrypted server in Switzerland, and all the audio files from the pen, the video from Eye of the Storm, have been automatically uploaded and sent to her every hour. They're called discovery materials for a potential lawsuit, father." "Best part," Chloe said, a cold smile flickering on her lips. She turned the tablet towards Harrison. The screen showed an ongoing video call. On the other end was my father, General Alistair Vance, sitting majestically in his study, the Union Jack beside him. Next to him was my sister, the lawyer Isabel Vance, her expression as hard as steel. "You're being live-streamed," Chloe announced. "Since you started your speech, Grandfather and Aunt Isabel have seen the whole thing. The slap, the crazy wife act, the part where you tried to drag Mom away." Isabel spoke from the screen, her voice sharp as a knife, echoing through the silent ballroom. "Hello, brother-in-law. I just wanted to inform you that a copy of this live stream, along with the entire evidence archive of Operation Reclaim Justice, was delivered to 3 places 5 minutes ago. 1 to your lawyer, 2 to the Senate Ethics Committee, and 3 to Sarah Jenkins of The Guardian." The name Sarah Jenkins made Harrison freeze. She was a renowned investigative journalist who had brought down 2 ministers. My father finally spoke, his voice deep and stern, devoid of any father-in-law affection. "Harrison, you have 5 seconds to take your hands off my daughter." Silence. 5. Harrison remained frozen, seemingly unable to process what was happening. 4. My father continued, his voice like cold steel. "And I think you should also know that Eye of the Storm doesn't just record video, it also performs thermal and acoustic scans. It recorded the spike in your heart rate before you struck, and the fear in my daughter's breathing. It's a biologically perfect lie detector test. 3. Harrison let go of my arm as if he'd been burned. He took a step back, looking at me, then at Chloe, then at the tablet screen in utter horror. Then, General Alistair Vance delivered the final blow, the ultimate twist. Oh, and Harrison, there's a fourth recipient, which is why I have you to thank. Harrison was stunned. Thank me? Thank you for being arrogant enough to invite Lord Ashworth as the guest of honor. He is under investigation by MI6 for illegal financial dealings with foreign powers. And the Mont Blanc pen doesn't just record audio, it has a secondary function, wireless data cloning in close proximity. It copied the entire contents of the encrypted USB drive Ashworth gave you in your study last week. The data shows you used classified parliamentary information to blackmail Ashworth in exchange for funding and his silence. Operation Reclaim Justice isn't just a divorce, Harrison. It's a counterintelligence operation. You're not just an abuser, you're a traitor. Lord Ashworth at the table, his face white as a sheet, dropped his wineglass on the floor with political and espionage scandal, scrambled to leave like rats fleeing a sinking ship. Hurried apologies, cursory handshakes, phones pulled out to call lawyers or assistants. Lord Ashworth was the first to leave, without a word, his face ashen, like someone who had just seen a ghost. Beatrice Lloyd collapsed into a velvet chair, her face aging a decade in seconds. The empire she had spent her life building and protecting was turning to dust before her eyes. 15 minutes later, while Harrison was still standing frozen in the middle of the room, my sister, Isabel, walked in. She wasn't alone. Following her were 2 associates from her law firm, carrying leather briefcases. She didn't come with the police. She came with weapons far more powerful, court orders. She wore a charcoal gray suit, striding across the marble floor as if it were her own territory. She walked straight to me, ignoring everyone, ignoring the chaos, and pulled me into a hug. A tight, strong hug. "I'm sorry it took so long, Ava," she whispered in my ear. "We had to do it right. Had to gather enough evidence to make sure he could never get back up, could never spin the story again." "I understand," I replied, finally able to release a breath I had been holding for 5 years. My tears flowed, but this time they were tears of liberation. Isabel let me go and turned to face the wreckage. She signaled to an associate, who approached Harrison, who now looked like a wax figure. "Senator Lloyd," the associate said professionally, his voice devoid of emotion. "This is an emergency restraining order, prohibiting you from coming within 500 meters of Mrs. Aveline Vance and Miss Chloe Lloyd, effective immediately. This is a divorce petition, on the grounds of prolonged mental and physical abuse. And this is a notice of a civil lawsuit for damages for psychological abuse and emotional distress." Isabel then turned to Beatrice, who was glaring at her with hatred. "Countess, perhaps you should call your lawyer as well. As an accomplice and for concealing your son's abusive behavior for years, you will also be a defendant in the civil suit. We have a recording of your conversation with Aveline in the hall tonight. It will be very interesting in court." My father didn't come. He didn't need to. His presence, through the screen and this perfect plan, had enveloped everything. He had laid a perfect trap, and the prey had walked right into it. I looked back at Harrison one last time. He had collapsed into a chair, his head in his hands, finally starting to call his lawyer, his voice filled with panic and stripped of all authority. He was no longer a god on Mount Olympus. He was just a small, pathetic man, brought down by his own arrogance and cruelty. I took Chloe's hand, her small but firm hand squeezing mine. Together with Isabel, we walked out of that mansion, out of my gilded cage. As we of freedom. It smelled of damp leaves and earth after rain. Maturity is not about never falling. It's about finding the strength to get back up, even when the whole world is trying to keep you down. And sometimes that strength comes from the people who love you, who have been quietly building you an escape route, patiently waiting for you to be ready to walk it. 6 months later. Our penthouse apartment in Holland Park was flooded with light. The giant glass walls offered a panoramic view of London, from the towers of Canary Wharf to the London Eye. No more dark corridors, no more judgmental portraits. Just space, light, and blueprints. The smell of freshly brewed coffee and drawing paper mingled in the air. The Guardian had published a shocking investigative series by Sarah Jenkins, Inside the Fall of a Dynasty. Harrison's political career had ended instantly, but that was just the tip of the iceberg. The MI6 investigation led to a closed trial. Harrison Lloyd was convicted of blackmail and endangering national security. The Lloyd family was mired in scandal and litigation. The Surrey estate was put up for sale to cover the massive legal fees. Beatrice Lloyd lived in seclusion, no longer appearing in public. I had reopened my own architecture firm, Vance Designs. My first project, and my most passionate one, was designing the Phoenix House, a modern, safe, and inspiring shelter and counseling center for victims of domestic abuse, funded in part by the damages I won in the lawsuit. It was built with empathy and hope, with open spaces, therapeutic gardens, and windows that always welcomed the sun. I had taken back my story, and now I was using it to help others write their new chapters. Chloe had won the National Debate Championship. Her final topic was justice, a gift given or a right reclaimed. She had argued brilliantly that justice is not always passively bestowed, but sometimes requires a carefully planned campaign. Sometimes, I watch her doing her homework by the window, the afternoon sun lighting up her brown hair, and I am still amazed by her intelligence, courage, and fortitude. She didn't just save me. She showed me that the strongest love is not protection, but empowerment. Tonight, my father and Isabel are coming for dinner. No stuffy political parties, just laughter, stories about my work, about Chloe's school, about Isabel's new case, and Dad's old war stories. A family. A real family. I stood before the blueprints for the Phoenix House, a pencil in my hand. No more ghosts, no more lies, just clear lines, strong structures, and an open future that I was building with my own hands, one stroke at a time.